I have seen it play out differently at different companies. And it's how your leadership is prepared to anticipate and prepare their teams for it, rather than just relying on people to perform at, super high levels and get out of it.
Hello and welcome to another exciting episode at the Being an Engineer podcast. Today, we continue our Open to Work series by welcoming Aaron Gebauer, an experienced mechanical design engineer and project manager. Aaron brings over 27 years of technical expertise, bold leadership, and results-driven teamwork approach. Having recently managed teams and established new departmental capabilities, Aaron is now seeking new opportunities to advance engineering teams to higher levels of performance. And we're excited to share his extensive experience and insights with the Being an Engineer podcast community. Aaron, welcome and thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Hello, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
So, what made you decide to become an engineer?
Well, probably my decision when I was graduating from high school about what to do with the rest of my life. I think I probably surprised my parents and other people. I think what made me decide to go into engineering is I think I had aptitude more for sciences and math in high school. And I was also, I'd say as a kid, highly into modeling and creating and artwork and other creative, nerdy sort of pursuits. And maybe that was, that just kind of gave me a good context to say, engineering school would be a good thing to do. Actually, as I recall, way back then, I was really interested in flying. I wanted to be a pilot of some kind. And so I caught things like Air Force and so on caught my attention. But then I thought, I don't know about the military. Maybe that's not for me. What else is, important to me? And I think that led me into engineering. But when I went into college, I also was enrolled in an honors humanities course or a program on the campus. It was an interdisciplinary program that anybody could get involved with. So I wasn't really sure. And I was also into music and a lot of other things. And finally, I had to kind of weed other things out and just say, let's get into engineering. And it's served me well since.
Nice. I love the journey there. Thank you for sharing the background. You mentioned that you're kind of into building and like modeling when you were younger. How has that evolved as you've progressed through your career as an engineer? Do you still really like the hands-on stuff, or are you more analytical, would you say?
I am definitely more of a hands-on person. In fact, I just recently thought I should try and get back into some of the, I said, I don't see those plastic models, for airplanes and stuff like that anymore. And so I looked around, and I've also later in life gotten involved in motorcycling. So I found a motorcycle model that I'm going to try, paint just right and everything like that. But no, I've definitely been a hands-on engineer. I think I value a lot in the design process about learning and exploring your design concurrently with your schedule, the hard place the targets that you have to meet throughout. I tend to favor nimble and rapid iteration, especially early on, because that can easily guide you towards really understanding what the requirements of that product are early on, as opposed to the 11th hour when you've got to get it into production. It's always better to figure that out sooner rather than later.
Yeah. Yep. A friend and former podcast guest, Chris Julian, he uses the term maximize your shots on goal, right? Just give yourself as much time as you can to shoot towards that goal, and you're going to miss a lot. But if you give yourself enough chances to shoot, eventually you're going to hit that basket.
Well, yeah, silver buckshot, as they say, right? But also fact of the matter is, especially if you're designing something that nobody's really that familiar with, and you might even need to provide education to your marketplace, you may not even know exactly what's going to serve the customer best. So not only exploration in the shop or in the lab, but also with your customers, right?
Yeah, good point.
So that will definitely, or your client, in the case of pipeline, for example, you really need to have a clear sense of direction and communication, and it's a little bit of exploration together in terms of what the final product's going to be.
Absolutely. Yeah, we often will do like a concept phase before getting into a full project, because even when there's a pretty good, robust user requirement specifications or requirements document, you don't know everything you're going after until you start getting into the weeds a little bit. And then, new things start popping up and you're like, oh yeah, I didn't think about that. Right. So doing some exploration, we've always found to be super helpful in the very beginning.
Yep. You mentioned shots on goal. I liken it. My analogy is taking a walk in the fog, because you have a high level of uncertainty at the beginning of a design project. And you know what your destination kind of is, but until you take a step forward and you get a better sense of what's around you, you don't really know the right direction to take in order to get there. So
walk in the fog. I like that.
I'll walk in the fog. Right on.
Yeah, that's great. And you're going to bump into things too that you can't see, right? Because you're in that fog.
Yeah, you might hit a rock that looked promising at first, but you got to go around it. Watch out for icebergs, all of that.
Great analogy. All right. Well, what I thought we'd do today is kind of take a walk down memory lane for you. And you've worked at quite a few different companies over the years, and see if we can maybe hit on several of these companies and see if we can pick out some valuable insight that you've gained in your experience and share with the community, provide some great value for those who are listening. And then at the same time, they get to know you, and maybe they understand your background and they think, oh, wow, I just heard about this great opening and I think Aaron could be a really good fit for it. And hopefully they reach out to you and say, hey, here's an opportunity. Contact this person. That's the goal. Hopefully everyone wins in this Open to Work series.
That sounds like a great idea. And by the way, I think you're doing a great service to the profession and our community by doing that. It's good it's a new spin on networking, which is I'm grateful for it. So thanks again for the opportunity.
You're very welcome. I'm happy to do it. All right. So let's start with FreeWire, which I think was your most recent company, and you were the manager of mechanical design. Maybe you can share just a little bit about what did you do at FreeWire, and maybe one of the key challenges or achievements that occurred during that time.
Sure. Well, I got hired at FreeWire, as you mentioned, as a manager. And the vision for this position that my director had was that it was to create a new division within the department. So he had, a kind of a continuation engineering group. He had NPI group that was really focused on the next product in the pipeline, bringing it to production. But then he also wanted this sort of forward-looking group who could go out and explore new technologies or figure out new ways of working. And that sounded like it was right up my alley in terms of helping organizations involve, building a team and bringing new capability into the organization. So all of that sounded really good. So, and plus FreeWire is a company involved with electric vehicle charging. And I've been interested lately in, I've had a long-standing interest in green tech or, renewable energy. But lately it's been energy storage, batteries, and other novel ways of storing energy to smooth out the supply-demand curve for some of these new energy resources. Anyway, so all of this was great, and I'll tell you about some of the experiences I've had, but there's also a lot to learn in the transitions. In this case, one of the main challenges that I had as a manager is that vision for this new department quickly needed to be put on the back burner because it became clear as I got into the job that there were larger issues at play in terms of raising funds, having money, and getting our next product out the door. I think we were in a little bit of that 11th hour syndrome I alluded to earlier. And in fact, you'll see it in the headlines that actually FreeWire closed their doors recently. So I was part of a first round of reduction in force, and then weeks later they gave everybody a certain amount of notice. So from that, that it was a quick adaptation that I needed to do. One, starting out with this brand new vision, going in a totally new direction of growth and optimism, but then all the way down to, boy, we were down on the floor, everybody, all hands on deck, and we really needed to have singular focus. So that was a particularly challenging, or a particularly difficult challenge to adapt to. But I think we did all right under the circumstances. We did move the ball forward on some of those new initiatives, but then we also quickly adjusted and lent a hand where needed and came together as a team for those other
I think
objectives.
that is, I hope this doesn't come across as flippant, just par for the course for new product development. That's all we do is new product development. We're always working on something new, something we've never developed before. And that situation seems just common, we're trucking along, we've got a schedule, and then all of a sudden, there's this thing that like we didn't even see coming, and okay, let's shift gears and make sure we can get that working. And it's invention, right? Like it's invention,
absolutely.
And there's inherent risk in it.
Well, yes, it is a risky business, but I have seen it play out differently at different companies, and it's how your leadership is prepared to anticipate those challenges and prepare their teams for it, rather than just relying on people to perform at super high levels and get out of it. There's a big difference, and if I hadn't. That was, in fact, the second layoff that I had experienced within less than a year. And so that, plus all the headlines around, especially around here in the Bay Area, it seems like there's a new round of layoffs just every other day. And it gets exhausting. And yes, you got to go long. You got to, you have to take risks. It's the name of the game. But then you start to wonder if all of this is happening, is this really sustainable? Is this really the best way to innovate and, take on new challenges? I really start to wonder if because what you ultimately you are playing with people's livelihood. And on the one hand, it does behoove the individual to always be proactive about finding their next opportunity. And we could talk more about that too, but I think there is a great deal of responsibility on the part of startup founders to realize that what they're getting into is they're setting themselves up to be employers, and that carries a great amount of responsibility, probably more so than they could ever realize if they're doing it for the first time.
I would tend to agree with that.
Yeah, right.
I'm curious if we flip the script here, and let's say that you now, Aaron Gebauer, you are the startup entrepreneur, CEO. Is there anything that you would have done differently had you been in charge of this?
Well, I joke sometimes, and you get into these conversations with your peers, and you're kind of talking. You say, boy, this is really, if I were doing it, I would do it this way. So I always say, well, next, when I'm running my own company, this is how I'm going to do it.
Yeah, right.
So, but no, seriously, the best advice that I would give myself or anybody in a leadership position is don't underestimate the necessity to invest in continuous organizational development and improvement. Because, and it's a similar advice I would give to myself and other individuals about their own careers, which is always be anticipate, even if you're in the most secure situation you could possibly be in, always be anticipating what the next opportunity could be or should be. There's always something better. It's almost like you have to have that mentality. In terms of companies, I'm always going to be bigger, and I may want to hold on to this kind of cool cultural aspect of these really brilliant people that I've pulled together as collaborators to get this thing going. But the company that we're going to have to grow into is going to be night and day different. So I need to understand what that looks like, and I need to anticipate it. And that means investment, certainly in time and money. But I think it's also being open-minded about ways your company could go. And I think it's also it's investing back into the company. It's okay to have skills gaps. You can't always necessarily find just the right set of qualifications and people to fill your need 100%. Maybe you need to have better time management, than you already have. Or maybe everybody's really good at prototyping and coming up with new ideas, but maybe we need to talk about what it means to be in high volume manufacturing, and what do we need to know there, So this is, I'm kind of an armchair philosopher on this because I did run my own company, but it was a sort of a freelancing business, but I haven't actually done like a startup or anything like that. But that's my vision anyway, is that you really always need to be investing in your future.
Well, I'm going to bounce around a little bit here and go back to another company where you worked, Ouster, and you implemented Solidworks PDM there, and I've been interested to talk with you about this because we have had experience with Solidworks PDM and it was not a good experience. And so I'm curious to hear, kind of how you guys did it and what pro tips you might have. Let me share just very briefly our experience, and then I'd love to hear how you implemented it and made it successful at your company. And I'll preface this by admitting that we might not be the perfect candidate for PDM anyway. We're not a product company, right? We're not managing releases of products. We're developing something brand new and then usually just building one of them and then sending it off to a customer. So, I could go either way. I guess I see the benefits of PDM, but for us, it's probably not a necessity per se. Yeah. Anyway, we made the investment and we paid a lot of money to get a whole bunch of seats of SolidWorks PDM. And we had, I guess, two kind of, what's the word I want to use? Two people who were, really gung-ho and kind of led the charge as far as getting it implemented. But, we are so beholden to our projects. We're a small team, and we don't have like a ton of extra resources. So there's a project that needs to get done. There's a deadline coming up. All right, guys, we got to switch gears from PDM and just focus on getting the project done. And that would happen a lot. And so I think one of the reasons for failure for us was we didn't have someone that was like, maybe not necessarily full-time, but really truly dedicated, to making PDM a success. Yeah. And I think without having that person, it's really hard to get it implemented and to have the whole team start using it. We did get it implemented. We used it for a couple of projects, but it was over the space of, it took like a year to really get it implemented and start using it. And then we used it for a few projects and just kind of said, you know what, we don't have the resources to really maintain it, and we don't really need it either. So we let it go and just stopped using it. So anyway, that was our experience. Tell us about yours.
Sure. Well, in the case, so Ouster was the second time actually that I implemented that at a company from scratch. So I might blend the two experiences to answer your question. Yeah. But at Ouster anyway, the case was that aside from the founder, there was one other mechanical engineer who was really doing product CAD work. So the CAD library, the CAD database for the product line was run by basically one person, and because they had the one engineer at this startup, and all of the files were managed in Google Drive. And I you don't have to answer right now, but I'd be curious to know what you went back to in order to manage your files, because even just on a network drive, your files can kind of be all over the place, and you don't really know what version things are at and so on. This was the case at Orbio. Orbio is actually, you'll see on my resume that I worked at Tenant Company Orbio. Orbio was a division, sort of a startup within a big company. And we were in our own office offsite, and we were out there kind of on the frontier. And they had elected to use Solidworks as their CAD package, which was new to the people that they brought from the other company. They had been using, I think, NX or something. But anyway, they were kind of learning SolidWorks, and at the same time trying to design this product. And they had to work with suppliers and consultants and other people. And the CAD library was zipped up and FTP'd every which way, and you couldn't tell what the current version was. And it was going to put a huge wrench in the works if we didn't get that fixed. So that's one of the reasons I helped Orbio with introduce PDM. But back to Ouster, there was one, really only one, maybe two people working on the CAD library, and they had then they hired me, and suddenly we had two, and we had to figure out how to share files and how to get that, and it was difficult syncing with Google Drive, and it started to have that same sense of uncontrolled versioning and everything like that. There also happened to be a need to really button down how drawings were conveying design intent to suppliers. So we did two things. One, we worked on getting PDM. So we had a central library where we could check things in and out and have some version control. It wasn't that much later that we hired 2 or 3 more engineers. And it's good that we had PDM in place to manage that. But so we did PDM, and we also did this drawing audit at the same time. So we were doing a lot of revision changes on drawings just for the sake of accuracy, or bringing them up to date, or elaborating on certain requirements, GD&T, and on all of that. So as we brought on more engineers, it was good to have a central database. And then we even acquired a new company, and they had a team in Scotland. So we had to work remotely with people. So we could all work off of a same central CAD database. The challenge actually was that before we even got to talking about PDM, there was an existing PLM system that was basically run by the operations team for managing all the documentation associated with getting the product built and out the door. And those two systems don't really talk well together. So back to your situation that you were describing, where you thought you really needed to have there was maybe a case for it, but when you implemented it, it just didn't work out. I don't know your exact situation, but with any tool like that, early and often, to the extent you can anticipate systemically or across departments how this is going to work, not just within your own, compartmentalized team, I think that's really where you can make a difference in how those tools work for you.
Yeah, hindsight is 20/20, of course. But looking back, if I had it to do over again, I would tell my past self that, or I would tell my future self that you really have to have someone who is at least part-time dedicated to managing PDM. Right.
Yeah.
And it's not just setting it up and implementing it, but it's working with the other engineers and training them on how to use it, because there are going to be a lot of questions about how to use it. And when you're not using PDM and then you start using it, it's a change. You have to learn a new system, and people are lazy. We don't want to learn a new system. We just want to do what we've been doing. And so it's a significant investment of time and money. That's the other thing is, we spent many hundreds of hours getting it implemented and tested. And of course, none of us had ever done this before. So we were building the plane as it was going down, pushed off the cliff. And we got it up and running, and it actually, it worked. It worked well, right? For the purpose, we wanted it for. It didn't seem like it was critical for us. You asked about how do we manage files. I'll talk a little bit about that, because that might be interesting and useful for other people who are listening to this. The reason that we got into PDM in the first place is we started getting into bigger projects where it wasn't just one person working on the project. It was teams of people working on the projects. And we had been using OneDrive. And for whatever reason, OneDrive does a terrible job with like making duplicated copies or conflicted copies in its database. So two engineers will open up the same part, and definitely if they both save it while it's open, it's the system, whatever it is, OneDrive or whatever, should flag that and say, hey, now I have two copies in here. I don't know what to do with that. That's okay. We had some poor man's rules and workarounds in SolidWorks settings for mitigating that risk. But what we learned is that, and again, this seems to be specific to OneDrive, other file sharing platforms we've used, we haven't had nearly as much of the problem. But when two engineers had maybe two different assemblies open, and even if they never saved any of the same parts, and we did tests on this, it would still create these duplicate copies in the directory. And you close them down and you have like a dozen duplicate copies, and you're like, shoot, which one is the right one? I don't know. So what we ended up doing, what we still do to this day, and what has been working pretty well for us, is we keep all of our project files in OneDrive except for CAD, and all the CAD files go into Dropbox. And for whatever reason, Dropbox does a much better job of handling conflicted copies or preventing conflicted copies in the wrong situations. Of course, if you open up two files and save them at the same time, you're going to get a conflicted copy, and you should. But outside of that situation, it does a much better job managing those files. And so that's what we're doing right now.
Well, you know what they say, always use the right tool for the job, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And if Dropbox works for you, more power to you. I think that in the case of Orbio, we kind of crept up on it because there was a lot of resistance in the organization to try something new, especially something we had to spend money on.
Yeah.
I kind of prototyped this a little bit. It's a long story, but I kind of demonstrated how having an organized bill of material was useful and having a central database was useful. So then people could really start to have an illustration for how this could be useful. But what does it mean in terms of how we do our work day to day? I lucked out that I had a very good partner in our value-added reseller. They had one person there who was a really good PDM technician, for lack of a better way of putting it. And he came in and he made sure that we had thought through how we were going to be using it. And also how we were going to set it up. I even took the administrator training course as a preliminary investment before we even committed to buying it, so that we could be sure that this was going to work. It's like any tool or instrument you buy. It's not just having it. You have to practice at it. You have to understand it. Yep. There's a certain amount of setup involved. My workshop, I guess I'm going to need a new tool for that. And I'll go out and I'll find the best one and I'll buy it and try it out. But in seriousness, you have to consider the implications of having the tool. It's like you can't just buy a mill and all of a sudden production, right?
I heard someone say the other day, the decision to buy a book, it does not infer that you have time to read that book. And same thing with this, the decision to buy PDM, we didn't fully appreciate the amount of time we really needed to dedicate to implementing it. So, anyway.
As I look across the room to my bookshelf, I'm sure I have no idea what you're talking about.
Right. None of us do.
I think, you have to, and I also spent a lot of time investing in talking with the people who were going to be using it. And PDM afforded us the file management we needed, but it also, by the time we were done, everybody in our small company, with the possible exception of our president, whether they were in purchasing or marketing or accounting, they all had a copy, or they were all running the non-CAD user version of PDM, because that was the best database we had for our bill of material or our product database. And they were all using that. We set it up accordingly with, there's version-free variables and so on. So the purchasing guy could go in there and change costs all day long, and we wouldn't have to roll the revision of the part in order for it to do it. But it was all there, and he could set up his own models. So
nice.
What works for one doesn't work for everybody. And I can see where a shop like Pipeline is going to have a different need than, say, Orbio or Ouster trying to get something out the door.
Yeah. And again, I'll say that it worked well once we got it set up. I mean, it did exactly what it was supposed to do, and it did a good job of it. So,
yeah.
It was mostly us and our, what's the word I'm looking for? Juvenile, lack of appreciation for the tool. There are some interesting tools coming out now. OpenBOM and Built, I think it's BILT, that are cloud-based versions of PDM, and they have some other bells and whistles in there as well. I'm pretty interested and excited to see how those tools evolve over time. By the way, they're not paying me to say that. I just happen they're cool tools.
I'm not being paid by SolidWorks PDM or anything like that. But,
yeah, right.
You mentioned the need for an administrator, which is actually something that has come up for me a number of times throughout my career, not just for, managing PDM, the administrative side of it, but it seems like, especially for Creo, is highly administrative intensive. If you've used it, I think you know what I mean. You have to kind of have someone dedicated. At FreeWire, we had one engineer who was the absolute expert at Creo and Windchill. And he was our liaison with their technical support and everything else like that. But it just seemed to be a huge burden on our team to have that level of administration. And heaven forbid if he should ever find the next big thing and move on, that department would be locked up, right?
Oh, man. Yeah.
So I think that I'm pleased to see things like SolidWorks is a little bit like that too. You mentioned some workarounds. You kind of have to, the whole team has to figure out their own workarounds just to get it to do what they want to. And I urge anybody involved in developing CAD software to figure out how to make it less administrative intensive. I think that Onshape has caught my eye. Again, I'm not being paid by Onshape, but here it's cloud-based. It's browser-based. I don't have to install anything ever. Sounds great to me,
Yeah, definitely.
So anyway, I could go on all day.
We've used Onshape not for project work, but for our CAD Club volunteer program. And it's great. I really like it a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, like you said, nothing to install. Updates happen automatically. You can use a low-end computer because all the processing happens in the cloud. All you need is a web browser and a good Wi-Fi connection, and you're good to go.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, let me take a very quick break here and share with everyone that the Being an Engineer podcast is brought to you by Pipeline Design and Engineering, where we don't design pipelines, but we do help companies develop advanced manufacturing processes, automated machines, and custom fixtures, complemented with product design and R&D services. Learn more at teampipeline.us. The podcast is also sponsored by The Wave, an online platform of free tools, education, and community for engineers. Learn more at thewave.engineer. Today we have the privilege to speak with Aaron Gebauer. So, Aaron, you have had, unfortunately, a couple of opportunities to manage transitions between different employment. I've had one myself. It was uncomfortable. How do you think about managing that process? You know, like the interim between different jobs and then finding the next one. And you mentioned always kind of being on the lookout for what's the next thing. Maybe you can talk a little bit about, your mindset and some processes that you found to be helpful there.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned the previous two riffs, but really, if I go down my resume, I got packaged out here. I almost got packaged out there, but left. I got fired once or twice, and there's always an ending to each of these opportunities, it seems. And again, maybe that's the name of the game, but I think there's probably a better way we could be doing that in the world. But that aside, the way and it's been stressful. There's no doubt about it. Going through periods of uncertainty like that is going to be stressful on anybody. So I have really had to pay attention hard in those times when something happens to me and I don't have control over it, to stay focused on sort of my mission, what I know is my core capabilities and my core abilities, and that I can rely on them. And it takes a lot of confidence and a lot of gut, I guess, to try and do that. But it's actually really true. Even if you get turned down over and over and over again, it can be demoralizing. That too seems to be the way of the world, that it's a numbers game almost. The more applications you put out, the more likely you are to get the one that you are going to end up pursuing. But I've also had to realize that there's a tendency, a work ethic to say more. I have to push harder. I have to do more. I'm not doing something right. I have to fix that, and just do all of that. But the reality is that, yes, you have to stay on it. You have to keep your spirits up. You have to stay focused on being productive in that regard. But you also owe it to yourself to take a break, to relax, to take care of yourself. Some of those periods in between jobs have been times when I've focused on exercise or mental health or showing up for family, and those sorts of things have really allowed me to remember who I am as a person, but also as a professional, and allow me to build that into what I'm looking for in the next opportunity, and then also find a suitable new direction. I think the other thing is that's talking about what happens once something's happened, or once you've ended something and are in between end and beginning. I think I mentioned it earlier that I would advise anybody to always be investing in that next opportunity. And the probably one of the most important things, and it's easy to say, and it's probably overrated, but you've got to stay connected with your network. You've got to be networking. Even if you're tired at the end of the day. And it is so common, I think, in our work culture that we are all in with our employer. We're all in with our job, and we're focused on that. It's hard to take the time out to change your mindset and say, okay, what else is out there? Who else can I be talking to? What are other companies doing that might be interesting to me? And the best example I can think of is my wife comes from a legal background, and a while ago she was working in private practice. As an attorney in private practice, especially, part of your job is marketing. Part of you have to go out and be at the networking events or the speakers or, having lunches with people or having coffees with people in order to get word out about your capabilities, but also about the firm. And that builds in security for the business. It's a little different for someone who's working in an engineering department in a manufacturer, for example. The focus is on productivity, and that's a good focus to have when you're working. But you also have to budget some time for yourself to go out to the meetup, to spend time on LinkedIn, but then also intentionally call people and speak with them and say, "Hey, I'm curious to know more about what you do. Can we have a coffee or something?" And put yourself out there. It's like I said, it's easier said than done. I am guilty of that trap where I'm just all in on work, and at the end of the day, I'm tired, and it's all I can do to get home and make dinner and go to bed and do it all over again. But it's so important that to be thinking outside the box and always be looking for what else there could be for you in your professional life.
In a way, all of us are running our own corporation, right? The corporation of Aaron Gebauer, the corporation of Aaron Moncur, the corporation of insert your name here. And even though we're employed by a company, I hate to say it this way, we kind of do have to at least keep one eye out for number one, right? Like, there might not be malicious attempts at taking your job away or anything, but stuff happens outside of our control, outside of our employer's control even, and it is a very reassuring feeling to know that you have other options should the worst occur.
It's not only good for you to do that, to have to develop yourself in that way. I think it's also good for the employer to expect that their employees are. It makes you a better professional, frankly, if you get out of your workspace, if you get out of your headspace that you're in day to day, go out there in the world and find out what is happening, And I especially advocate for cross-functional networking. Talk to people in marketing. Yeah. Talk to people who are running their own engineering business. Talk to people in doing something completely different, because it keeps you active. It helps with your communication skills, for one thing. It's easy to think about as I'm looking out for me, and that's disloyal to the company. Or my employer is going to see me doing this, so I have to keep it secret. Otherwise, they're going to think that I'm disloyal. That mentality is a little bit toxic, I think. No, you are doing what all good professionals should be doing. And that is building yourself and building your career. And I think companies have a stake in that, especially if they see people doing that who have that level of initiative and that level of motivation. They should be encouraging it. So if I were a manager and my employee came to me and said, "You know what? We got a lot going on right now, but I got to leave half an hour early today to make it across town for this networking event," that would thrill me. I would be so happy. Good, go do that. I might eat those words in a different circumstance, but I would still be. I would want to encourage people on my team to do that, because it only makes them better, which makes the company better. And that's the other thing, if I find a new opportunity for myself that's better, it may pay better, it's a better team, something that really interests me, you owe it to yourself to go do that. And not only that, if it's the right people that you're working with, if you have a secure job and a secure team that you really like, they are going to be thrilled that you found a new opportunity. So go do it. It's not disloyal. And if it is a good team that is sad to see you go, that is one of the best circumstances you could end up with, because You've made contacts that will hopefully be friends for life, and they will have your back, and they are sad to see you go. And that is a great story to tell prospective employers.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice perspective. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
You had mentioned, taking time out to take care of yourself a little bit ago. And I had a couple of thoughts I wanted to share on that. I agree. I think that's really important. We do everything we can do. And at the end of the day, it's easy just to, I'm so tired. All I want to do is make dinner and go to bed. But, and if it can be easy to feel like we're not doing enough, especially in our society, in our culture where, there's this workaholic Superman syndrome, right? If I'm not putting in 50, 60-hour weeks, I'm not doing enough. I have had periods of uncertainty, certainly in my career as well. And it's really uncomfortable, right? You feel like you don't have control. And I have a silly little story to share that there was this one experience where, a tree in our front yard was overgrown. Let's just put it at that. And my wife is suggesting that perhaps I should go out there and trim this tree and finally, cut it back. So I said, okay, sure, I'll go out and do that. And there's this one branch in particular that was so overgrown, it was almost touching the ground. I mean, it was like, 10 inches away from touching the ground. And there were quite a few other branches out there that were clearly overgrown as well. But this one in particular was so close to touching the ground. And I thought, it would be kind of funny if I just let that grow until it actually touches the ground. So I cut all the other branches off and I came inside. My wife says, thank you. But like the one branch I really wanted you to cut, you didn't cut. And I was like, well, I just thought it would be kind of funny to wait until it's actually Anyway, I reflected on that later, and this is during a period of uncertainty. And I thought to myself, I wonder, maybe subconsciously, I just wanted to feel like I had control over something. It was a silly little, really in the grand scheme of things, doesn't mean anything at all. But it did allow me to feel like I had some small iota of control over my life in that period. And that was kind of helpful. And so, I think one thing that we can do in periods of uncertainty is look for the areas in our lives where we do have some control, because, that feeling of being powerless or of no control is really difficult, for us to manage.
Control is a tricky thing, I think.
Yeah.
You wanted to just have something that you could define and have some ability to control or to manipulate in a way that you could affect an outcome.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I think that, and for me, if things seem very uncertain, I can focus on what could have been or what should be or what's expected of me. And I can really focus on that, the future. Or I really screwed up in that case. I'm no good. And all those negative voices start. So I kind of tend to focus on just what is right in front of me and be successful at that. This kind of plays into engineering design too. I am so focused on getting this product launched. I'm not really going to try something brand new. I'm not going to take a risk on a brand new idea. And so I'm just going to go with what I know, and I'm going to focus on that. And it's like you're holding on to the edge of the swimming pool, right? When you realize that the edge of the swimming pool is floating with you, that's a problem, right? But the point is, you want to, I think, especially as engineers, we want to have control. We want to make sure that things are going to come up predictably, reliably, and we're going to hit the target. But part of our work, part of our profession is there's a creative side, and that creative aspect is seemingly uncontrolled. And so taking care of yourself sort of means giving yourself a break from control. I started doing some meditation exercises, and it's not like it's following some new belief system or anything like that. if people are unfamiliar with meditation, I liken it to just giving your brain a break. It's like you could work out every day of the week, but if you don't rest, you're not doing yourself any good. So,
I would almost say that that's a form of asserting control over your own life, right? I'm giving myself permission to like just chill out and just be in the moment.
Balance would be another way to put it.
Yeah.
I need to stay focused on my job search. I have to apply myself there. And it's hard because I'm not getting up going to the office. I've really got to be self-motivated to do that work that's maybe, not as pleasing as anything else I could be doing, but I've got to go do it. But then you also need to say, I'm going to make sure I get to the gym today, or I'm going to give my brain a break. And, the other analogy is if, I don't know how old you are, but when your younger friends, maybe just out of college who are single, are dating, and they've got kind of the specification for who it is that's going to be perfect for them. They just have to go out and meet them, right? And they get tired. They get burnt out in the whole thing. And they finally said, I'm just going to not date anybody ever again. I'm just going to be me, and I'm going to do my own thing. And that's when they find the magic. That's when they meet someone who's going to be.
Yeah.
So it's that kind of mental health, that kind of self-care allows you to kind of relinquish some of that need to have control and balance it with, I guess, trusting yourself and, finding yourself, for one way to put it, finding a way to say that I actually have a lot of great capability. And maybe I've been neglecting some of that. Maybe I need to pull some of that back into the equation and apply that. I'm doing that a little bit in my job search right now. Yes, I'm seeking conventional employment and would love to speak with people about, new positions and how we can work together. But frankly, I'm also thinking about going back to freelancing a little bit because things do seem to be so unstable in the employment market. Maybe that's a better way to go. Maybe there's more security there. So I'm giving that a thought and would be interested in talking with people about either, collaborating as a client or, in fact, there's more and more models, it seems, for doing that. I'm having conversations with an organization called Informal. I don't know if you've heard of them, but they're set up and they sort of have a tiered system of having a network of freelancers. When I ran my own freelancing business, the trouble was doing the work and getting the work at the same time. The way it looks to me so far is that it's a way to not have to worry so much about getting the work. And you are also backed by a larger network of people, which
that's really interesting.
Could be appealing. So next time we talk, I'll let you know how that goes.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about that. Well, let's see. I think we'll probably wrap things up here. Let me ask you one more question before I let you go. I'm going to take this back into engineering. Okay. Thinking back over your experiences, right, over the past few decades. Yeah. Can you think of one way where you or your team were able to accelerate the speed of engineering?
Well, technically speaking, I would say that actually not technically speaking. I would say that some of the ways my teams have found ways to accelerate engineering would be collaboration and how we do our work together. I think there's a management style which says, I'm going to assign this work to this person, this work to this person, and this work to that person. They're all going to go get it done, and everything's going to be fine. But there's strength in the teamwork. So if we think of it more as an orchestra or as a team, we can level up our engineering because not only can we share our own unique capabilities and talents and knowledge, but you get that sort of chatter in the kitchen, which allows you to think of things you haven't thought of, or, hey, I need help with this, and you can help each other out. And it just goes a lot more smoothly, cross-functionally as well. I think especially with manufacturing, in the case of, a company that's making something at high volume, you as a design engineer or a product engineer, you have to be in lockstep and in league with manufacturing engineers and people on the floor. Taiichi Ono said, go to the Gemba, go where it happens. You have to have that kind of connection to level up your engineering. Same with the voice of the customer in that regard. So any example that I would give you throughout my career would probably be tied strongly with that: better communication, better teamwork, and investment in making things better. It seems to be so important in organizations.
Yeah, I know one of the things that engineers like so much about working here at Pipeline is it feels like everyone is in it together. Even if you're in totally different projects, this happens constantly, right? Engineer on team A will be working on a problem and just can't quite figure out a solution to it. So he'll ping a few of his team members on different teams, right? Team B, team C, different projects all together, and say, hey, I'm working on this thing. I can't quite figure it out. I've tried this. I've tried that. Nothing's working. What other things might I try? What other ideas can you think of that might work? Yeah. And they'll just get in a room, right? And just on the spot start brainstorming. What about this? Have you tried that? And all of a sudden, an hour later, okay, here's 3 new great ideas that I hadn't thought of before. And they go try that. So that absolutely has accelerated the speed of engineering for us.
Yeah. I think that's the magic of what we do, is that kind of collaboration, but actually in terms of kind of technical work, we talked earlier about rapid iteration of prototyping. Don't be afraid to not make the perfect thing right away, right out of the gate. Get in there, get messy, get in the sandbox, get in the lab, build that prototype, even if it's just out of office supplies, and you'll learn something,
Yep. Absolutely. All right. Well, Aaron, what a pleasure. It's been speaking with you today. I sure appreciate you sharing some of your time and wisdom and insights with the Being an Engineer community. How can people get in touch with you?
Certainly on my LinkedIn profile, Aaron Ron Gebauer, Geb. That's Gorilla Eats Bananas, AUER. But you can also reach me.
I'm Aaron Moncur, founder of Pipeline Design and Engineering. If you liked what you heard today, please share the episode. To learn how your team can leverage our team's
talking to another Aaron.
Developing
it's been a good time.
advanced
Thanks for having me
manufacturing
on.
processes, automated machines, and custom fixtures, complemented with product design and R&D services, visit us at teampipeline.us. To join a vibrant community of engineers online, visit thewave.engineer. Thank you for listening.